You're listening to the Exponential Entrepreneur podcast. This is the podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs who understand that exponential business growth isn't achieved through traditional business tactics alone, but through personal development, the ultimate leverage point to scale businesses beyond conventional limits. Hosted by Erika Ferenczi, featuring lessons from the Practical, Profitable Mindset program, created by R. John Robbins, Alejandra Leibovich, Erika, and Oscar Ferenczi. And here's your host, Erika Ferenczi.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Welcome to the Exponential Entrepreneur. Today, we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Emily Phillips. She is the founder and managing attorney of Miami Family Law Group, where she leads a dedicated team focused on helping families navigate some of their life's most difficult transitions. And they do that with clarity, compassion, and strategic guidance. Emily concentrates her practice in family law, probate, guardianship, and estate planning, assisting clients with matters such as divorce, child custody, and time sharing, probate administration and litigation, guardianship, and creating plans to protect their families and their legacies. She has over 23 years of experience advocating for families across Florida, and she is passionate about helping clients find peace of mind during emotionally challenging times while building practical solutions for their future. Outside of the office, Emily is deeply committed to community education and empowering families through workshops, webinars, seminars, especially in the areas of estate planning and family protection. She is very passionate about mentorship, professional growth, and creating a positive impact both within her team and, most importantly, for the clients she serves. And it is such a pleasure to have you on the show today, Emily. Welcome.
You're welcome, Erika, and thank you very much for having me here today. I really appreciate it.
I know you have been an entrepreneur since 2007, I believe you mentioned. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to become an entrepreneur versus being an employee for someone else.
So in 2007, at that point in time, I had been an attorney for about 5 years, and I wasn't really happy in my current job. And I, was thinking about what I wanted to do next and realized that I didn't really want to take another job. I really felt like I would be able to start a firm and grow a practice that would be an environment where I would be happy working as well as other people would be happy working. And so I really was at a crossroads thinking, if I don't start my own business, I may not continue practicing law because I just wasn't really happy working really in any job I'd ever had as an attorney.
So what about the jobs that you had or being an attorney working for someone else was so unsatisfying to you?
I think for maybe one of the jobs that I had, it was the type of work that I was doing that I wasn't really thrilled about. I think for one of the other positions I held, I didn't really like the environment and the culture. I didn't really find that it was as collaborative as I wanted it to be. As a young lawyer, most young lawyers are looking for someone to mentor them and give them guidance. But the truth of the matter is that in most small and medium-sized and probably large law firms, lawyers are so busy, they don't have the time. It's very rare to find someone who's going to spend the time to mentor you and train you. And, in some ways that's good because all of my bosses threw me into situations and it's a sink or swim environment. So you do learn a lot. But I just felt like in terms of my journey in 2007, what I really wanted to do was build something and have a nice business where it was a nice culture. People were happy to go to work and focus on the practice of law because it's challenging enough.
What was the trigger point where you said, now is the time, I'm going to go for having my own business, going out on my own?
It was actually kind of one of those moments in your life that you remember, maybe like in a movie. At the time, I was working in Broward County and I was driving on the turnpike and the sun was setting and something entered my head. So I don't know if I was listening to a radio talk show or something at the time. And I thought, you know what? There's no way I'm taking another job. I'm going to start my own law firm. It's going to have to work. And this is just what I'm going to do.
What about starting your own thing was more unsettling to you, or what thing made you the most afraid or gave you the most pause?
When I started my own law firm, I had 0 clients. I didn't have any clients at all that I was starting the firm with. I didn't grow up in South Florida. I grew up in a little town in Ohio, but by that point in time, I'd already lived here for 5 years. The smartest thing I did was we rented office space with another small firm that the cases they didn't really want to handle, they would refer to us. And it actually worked out. I think even within the first week, we had 1 or 2 small cases. And so that was actually really helpful. But I just think that the ability to be your own boss and have your own schedule is liberating in a lot of ways. It's a bigger demand on your time. You do work more, but it's a different type of work, right? You're building something, you're creating something. So I don't think it's as taxing on your mental bandwidth. And I think I at least feel a lot more dedicated, working at my own business than I ever felt working as an employee anywhere.
For the first 12 months, a full 12 months of business, how much was your law firm grossing then?
I would say the first year, we started in September of that first year. So we definitely finished the year at a loss.
Yes.
However, after about a year in, probably towards the end then of 2008, which, as you know, that was a very tough economic time in the United States, we were actually starting to be cash flow positive and we're actually starting to make money. The first 2 years were definitely the most difficult and things really started to improve after that.
What would you say to somebody that is thinking about starting up about this fear of difficult moments or financial difficulties or ups and downs of cash flow problems?
I think that your mindset when you go into starting a business should really be that no matter what, yes, this is going to work. I remember at some point in time within the first year, and we were kind of struggling, somebody had asked me, do you think that this is really worth it? And I said, yes, if I have to stay at night and work a job at Burger King to bring in extra income to support myself, I'm going to grow this business because I felt that strongly about working for myself. But I think one of the smart things that I did back then, and I would always recommend anyone to do, is lower your expenses. Don't increase your expenses. Don't go out and buy like the new car that you've been looking at. That's a $700, $800, $1,000 monthly payment. To the extent you can reduce your expenses, do so until you really start to be profitable. I think that was a really wise thing that I did. I also, I wasn't going on as many vacations back then, just buying extra things that I didn't need. I think that that's super important because you want to avoid as much as possible acquiring debt, right? That's super important because that in and of itself is very anxiety inducing.
Sometimes entrepreneurs, or very often, are people who are willing to leave for a few years, 2 years, 3 years, sometimes even 4 years, as very few people are willing to leave the rest of their lives, as most people will never be able to leave. Is it worth it? Now that you're here in 2026, what is the best part of having your own business?
I definitely believe it's worth it. There are many things that have been very rewarding for me about having my own business. Definitely creating jobs for people, creating opportunities where they're being paid more than they were being paid at other companies or other law firms, I think is super powerful to me, but gratifying. We offer a lot of benefits to our employees, and I keep trying to add additional benefits to retain and acquire top talent. So to me, I think investment in people, is super important. Being able to provide, for my own future in terms of my own retirement is super rewarding. I've given jobs to my family members who work for me. They work remotely. That is something that's been super rewarding for me because it's just helped them. And, of course, it's also helped me and the firm grow. There are an endless list, I think, of gratifying elements to owning your own firm. Of course, you have more flexibility with your schedule in many ways. That's always gratifying. I think there's a misconception that a lot of people think when you own a company that you're the boss and no one's your boss. But I always tell the employees, I have a lot of bosses. The clients are our bosses to a large extent. The judges are our bosses to a large extent. And that's just the way it is when you run your own business. So I highly recommend anyone who's interested in this journey that they pursue it. One thing I should have added earlier, Erika, back in 2007 that I did that I think helped me when I started my firm was I did have a business plan back then. My fiance is a wealth manager and he has an MBA, and he insisted back then that we create this business plan. He helped us write it.
Smart man.
I think that was extremely beneficial because I think it laid some ground rules about our spending and what we were going to do in our personal lives. So I think that was super helpful. And of course, that's something that you feel very passionately about, which is, have a business plan because that's you're designing your future.
We talk about having a business plan, and basically what that means is a document that is a simple document, right? This is not a document that's 80 pages long. No, it's a simple document that tells you how is that this business is supposed to make money. And it goes through what we call the 7 parts of every good business, which is marketing, sales, production, right? You get clients, where you get leads, then you get clients, then clients sign in the line which is dotted, then production needs to produce whatever it was promised to these clients, then physical plant, like where are these things going to be produced. In the case of a law firm, obviously it's in the law firm. And even if you're virtual, right, it can be computers, it can be softwares, it can be all of telephones, all of those things. And the people that operate all of those systems and processes. At the beginning, the people is you and maybe an executive assistant, maybe. But at the beginning is you. What did you say?
Not even. I mean,
not even.
Yeah. It took a long time to have a full-time employee. And I think, Erika, the educational piece of the 7 major parts of a law firm, it's invaluable because especially in the legal community, there's, kind of a code of conduct that's unwritten. And there are norms that most lawyers follow simply because that's just the way people have done things for decades, maybe perhaps even, hundreds of years. And that's why I think a lot of attorneys don't spend as much time as they need to on the planning and the financial management piece.
And what is that code of conduct? Tell me more.
I think that with the practice of law, attorneys are so committed to their clients, to winning, to making sure they're prepared, to making sure that they have a good reputation in the community. They want to show up to their hearings prepared. They don't want the judges to think that, hey, I don't know what I'm talking about. And there's a little bit of a disconnect between the practice of law and all that's required of it, and then the management of a business. And even a very small law firm, even if there are no employees, but they're being a solo practitioner, it is a business. Sadly, there are a lot of extremely intelligent and well-educated people that, aren't really prepared financially for some type of disaster, an illness, or even retirement, which is super unfortunate. And in family law, we meet people all the time, and part of our representation and job is to investigate their financial picture, where they've been and where they're going. And I think that in the United States as a whole, there just needs to be more education in terms of financial management. And it's critical when you're running a business. You can't, like you mentioned earlier, if you've earned $5, you cannot spend 10. And
unless you're willing to incur that, right?
Correct. And then sadly, you see a lot of very brilliant attorneys that have worked extremely hard that turn around and they're 69, 71 years old and they're not really prepared for that later stage in life. And I think that's depressing. I don't think that's unique only to the practice of law. I think that's something that is lacking in, maybe junior high school, college. How are we educating people?
Moving to the 7 parts of the business, one of the other thing that I was going to say, the business plan and a budget, right? A budget, maybe for your law firm at the beginning, there's not a lot of income, so it's not going to be a big budget or anything like that, but you can definitely do a personal budget. I would definitely recommend people to do a personal budget of saying, okay, this is the amount of money that I have available to spend because I'm going to bootstrap at the beginning, right? And what are the things that I am willing to dedicate this money to? Because there's just so much that it can be paid with this amount. So what you're saying is really, really important. When you're starting a business, there's also a lot of investment, right? A lot of investment in not only financial, of course, there's financial investment, but there's a lot of investment in time and energy and attention, right? And we were talking with someone else and we were saying, you guys is like the owner, the owner's mind is like a very, very precious real estate. And you need to make sure that that real estate goes to those activities and issues or things that can create more revenue. And then that led me to just remembering and telling the audience how important it is to really create this big mindset shift that you just talked about, which is the second that you open a business, you're not only a lawyer. You are primarily a business owner because otherwise things don't work out. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience about making that shift and saying, I cannot only be that really great lawyer, which you definitely want to be as good as you possibly can, but I also need to be the person that is growing a company, growing a business, focusing on business development?
I do think that it is really important from your own personal mindset that you make a decision that you have to devote a certain amount of time and a certain amount of resources to the management of the firm. That's something, you promote, and that's something How to Manage promotes, and that's absolutely critical. I know that at some point in time in my career, I realized that it was simply impossible to be the one attorney that was meeting with new clients, preparing for a hearing, making sure all the bills were out, talking to clients if they had a question about their bills, making sure all the other administrative work was done in terms of bookkeeping, making sure everything was done for taxes. It just is, it's just impossible. And it's extremely stressful. And it does require a person to make a decision to change their identity a little bit from being the practitioner, which is what all lawyers are basically trained to be right out of law school, to, hey, I need to be the captain of this ship, and this ship, even though it's a small business, someone has to oversee everything.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy decision for people to make, even mentally, but then to actually do it in practice, I think is challenging, because I think lawyers certainly get so much gratification from the practice of law. That's why most of them, that's why they wanted to be lawyers. There's a feeling of a little bit of being a rescuer or the hero or a savior, which makes anyone feel good about himself or herself. And you do kind of lose a little bit of that as you grow the law firm. But it's just an impossibility. You can't do both well. And so I think for individuals who are really interested in growing their law firm because their firm has reached a size where they simply just can't do it all, I think they have to make that decision, and it requires a big mindset shift.
I have met Emily. She is part of the Practical Profitable Mindset program, which is a program that we run every day for mindset inside of How to Manage a Small Law Firm that she mentioned earlier. And those 7 parts of the business that I mentioned are originally created by R. John Robbins, which is the founder of How to Manage a Small Law Firm, right? And that's part of how I met Emily and how we consistently invite the business owners that we work with to make that transition from just really understanding that if you're going to open your own business, being a good lawyer or being a good chef or being a good architect or whatever your profession is just not enough, because you're going to struggle financially if that's the only thing you do. Based on what you said, Emily, where lawyers struggle a lot with that identity of being the rescuer or the savior, I think there's an opportunity to reframe that thing, and you can continue to be the the rescuer or the person that fixes the problem, but just through other people, right? And that allows you to not only help, well, instead of helping 50 different clients, then we're talking about, well, now I'm creating this enterprise that is helping this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people through all of these other hands that I have in front of me. And there's an opportunity to reframe the helping in that way.
Absolutely. Not only are you able to reach more clients and help more clients, but then you're also providing a platform for your employees to do that work on your behalf and on the firm's behalf. And they're helping the clients. And, I think especially when you built something that you feel passionate about and your company that has the values that you want it to have and the vision that you want it to have, I think that you're able to have a bigger impact overall on the community than, I would have had if I had just stayed, by myself with perhaps just maybe one or two employees.
Would you share with us one or two of the most difficult, challenging, uncertain moments that you've had on your entrepreneurial journey, and how did you overcome them?
One of the most challenging things about running and operating a law firm, especially when you're a younger lawyer, and I started my firm when I was only an attorney for about 5 years, which is still considered to be a younger lawyer. It is really still navigating the court process and understanding how everything works, in addition to client management, running the business, making sure the bills are out on time, making sure all of the other things that have to be done by the business owner, that they're also done. That, I think, was very overwhelming for me for a long time. And I found myself neglecting a lot of those activities because, as I mentioned earlier, my primary purpose and motivation was always to help a client reach the client's goal.
That's what gave you the most satisfaction.
Correct. And I also felt like it was, if I had to prioritize all of the things, I'm going to be sure that I'm 110% prepared for this hearing versus getting this bill out on time. And then that starts happening over and over and over again. And then you find out, oh my gosh, I'm behind on all of these administrative activities, and my staff is behind on all of these administrative activities because I'm not being an effective leader, which I think is what it ultimately boils down to. So I think that was really difficult and overwhelming. And I definitely think I'm a lot further along on that journey now and have learned that how critical it really is to have those people in your firm that own that work and take care of it, because not one person can do everything in a law firm.
You mentioned making this transition, right? If there's another person out there dealing with the same problems, what are one or two mindsets, meaning ways of thinking about the situation, that you would recommend they start changing in order to have that particular breakthrough?
I think that one of the most important mindset mantras, perhaps, that anyone owning a business, it doesn't have to be a law firm, but I think any business, and especially a law firm, is there are going to be highs and lows every single day. And managing your reaction to them and your perspective on them is absolutely critical. Realizing that it's temporary. One of my fitness coaches, I always remember, she'd scream at us, nothing lasts forever, Just get moving, nothing lasts forever. And it's true like that in business as well. You can have a day where you have 7 or 8 or 9 things go wrong in the same day. That just feels defeating. And then the next day you can have 7 or 8, 9 things go well and go right. And I think just measuring and managing your reaction to all of it is critical, and realizing that is just part of the journey. Things will go well, things will go wrong. And it's really important to just kind of feel like Teflon and just let it roll off your back. Don't be celebrating all of the time, all of your wins, and don't be crying and depressed and angry about all of the losses, because you've just got to be very level-headed about the ebbs and flows, and just not react too much. And I think a lot of lawyers do tend to be a little bit of perfectionists in a sense, just because when you're a litigator and you go to court, but you basically have to be perfect with a lot of things. And so, you can get unnerved about just something that didn't go well. And it's really important to maintain that perspective of, okay, how can we work through this? It's not fatal. It's not fatal.
A really big believer on having year-to-date numbers, right? Like if you can get your numbers, and like I promise you, I just met with another person, another business owner this was 2 weeks ago. This is a person that is going, their business is on a run rate to close this year at around 1.2 million in gross revenue. And they were telling me that, oh my God, this business is going so bad and it's so terrible and we're so afraid because we won't be able to pay our bills. And it's like, okay, let's review what's the problem. And as we started reviewing the numbers, and I asked them, well, in this same period, let's say that I met with them in June, the same period of time for 2025, how much were you guys, billing in gross revenues and income and all of this? And it turns out that the business has grown from last year to this year's same period of time, 55%.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
55%, when an average growth for a law firm in the United States for a small law firm is 5%. So we're here, with this business that has grown 9 times more, and these owners are having a meltdown. And the reason why they were having a mental breakdown or a mindset issue is because last month was a really bad month.
Yeah.
But when we look at the year to date, they were perfectly fine. And I think that speaks so much about what you're saying, Emily, and how important it is to keep the big picture and to understand that there's going to be ebbs and flows and ups and downs and really bad days and really phenomenal days. And, I think there's a saying that it ain't over until it's over.
Sometimes you lose the battle and win the war. That's something as a litigator you have to remember in a lawsuit. You can lose a couple of motions and then you win big at trial. So that's just the way it happens and it works. But to your point, Erika, knowing your numbers, I think, is just really critical. For a long time, I will tell you, I did not know my numbers. I did not know them.
Sometimes I think that lawyers are allergic to numbers. They don't want to look at the numbers.
I think that many lawyers are allergic to numbers. I think it is also part and parcel of what I was saying earlier, that most lawyers don't really spend a lot of time looking at anything that relates to the administration of the business. I think that the practice of law is all encompassing and it's just so stressful that they just almost have blinders on to other things. I think one of the most critical things any business owner can do is make sure that they have their numbers in order every month, that they're looking at them. They tell a story, right? They tell a story in an unemotional way in terms of looking at where can you improve, where are the opportunities for improvement, and where, are you excelling? So knowing your numbers is invaluable.
Sometimes people tell me, like they literally tell me, it's like, I don't want to look at the numbers, but what if they are bad? I said, well, if we look and they're bad, at least now we know and we get to work to fix it, right? I think it was Peter Drucker that said, you cannot manage what you don't measure. Okay, Emily, 2 more questions because I know we're getting to the end we're at the end of our time. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time. So the first one is, tell us about your ideal client. Meaning, if somebody is suffering with this problem or that problem, please call Emily and then give us, the URL and a phone number where you guys can be reached at.
So at Miami Family Law Group, our practice areas are family law, all areas of family law, divorce, custody, adoption, relocation cases we handle, domestic violence. So in that area, those areas of the law, we are looking for ideally a professional or a business owner who is ready to make a change in his or her life and who wants to do it in a thoughtful and strategic way to move on to the next stage of life and in a respectful way, not only to perhaps children, because oftentimes children are involved, but also to the person that they're divorcing from or ending a relationship with. We do litigate, so we go to court often and we go to court when we need to, but we're also big proponents of mediation and settling anything out of court, because if you can be the designer of your own plan, your own parenting plan, or your own marital settlement agreement, we think that's better than allowing a judge who's a stranger to do so. And then my firm also practices probate and guardianship administration. We handle contested and uncontested probates and guardianships, so that those are needed when someone has unfortunately passed away and we have to open an estate. And a guardianship is opened if somebody needs someone to act on his or her behalf because they lack the legal capacity to manage his or her affairs. And we handle all of those cases as well. So our office is located in Coconut Grove. The phone number is 305-701-2901. And our website is www.miafamilylaw.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so very much.
Welcome.
And so you heard it. If you have any of those problems, you can always reach out to Emily and be really well taken care of. Okay. Then last one is, what are the mindset shifts or nuggets that you would like to leave our audience with today?
One of my favorite phrases about personal development and being on a journey, whether it's a business or even getting a degree, is one of the things you already said earlier in this interview, which was you have to be willing to spend a few years of your life the way most people won't, so that you can live the rest of your life the way that most people can't.
Which, by the way, that's a phrase I think, I don't know, I'm just giving credit. That's I don't know if he created it, but R. John Robbins, who's the first one, who's the founder of How to Manage a Small Law Firm, a really, really dear friend of mine, said that. So I don't know if he learned it from someone else, but I just wanted to give it credit. It's not originally mine. Okay.
Yeah, it's not originally mine either. And I think the first time I ever did hear it was from R. John Robbins. So I agree. I often give that advice to younger people that are, saying that they don't want to spend an extra 3 years in law school, or they don't want to go 4 years of medical school and then deal with residency when all of their friends are out and they took jobs and they're already making money. And I have sometimes told younger people that exact quote. And that is true for really anything in life, whether it's you're looking to get an additional license, whether you want to start a new career path altogether, or whether or not you want to start your own company. You do have to be willing to change course and pivot. And maybe it's working harder, maybe it's reducing your expenses. But if you have a vision and a dream in mind, it's not going to be forever. Some point in time, you're going to probably have more free time and you're going to have more financial resources to do things you would not have been able to do had you not been committed to your future and your goals. So I think that's super important. We live in a society where we're all looking for instantaneous gratification, right? And we all admire all of these super famous people that we see the end of their journey, but none of us really know and understand what it took for them to get to that point. And nobody just shows up in life as a superstar. There's a lot of hard work and discipline and focused decision making in terms of how you get there.
People see, obviously, they see the overnight success story.
Yeah.
The overnight success story that has been 10 or 15 years on the making. Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that what that reminds me of is that if the goal is important to you, I want to have my own business, I want to build a company, I don't want to work for someone else, or I want to do this or that or the other, whatever the objective is, the journey is a worthy endeavor. And there's going to be a lot more moments where you're going to feel like you're failing than you're going to feel like you're winning. Like the failing upwards.
Yeah.
It is like we keep failing, but as long as there's a trajectory where we keep failing at larger things or larger endeavors or more important things, then we're winning. Then we're winning in life.
That's absolutely true. And I think it's super important to believe in yourself. We're lucky to live in this country where it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is. It doesn't even matter if you have money to start. A lot of times you can borrow the money to get to the point where you want to end up, as long as you're committed to your plan and you have the discipline to be committed to the hard work that's required to get there. And I think it's also invaluable to have people like yourself along the way to help others, because you don't come out of college or any professional school with a handbook on how to run a business.
Coaches, mentors, guides, for lawyers specifically, how to manage a small law firm. It's a big part of all of our journey, right? Your journey, my journey, all of our journey.
Absolutely.
And just so important to get those guides. Well, Emily, thank you so very much for your time. Have a wonderful day. And for you guys, thank you for staying tuned to this podcast, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much, Erika. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Exponential Entrepreneur Podcast. We encourage you to take action on it today. Share what you've learned with another entrepreneur. Sign up for our newsletter to get bonus content you won't get anywhere else at exponentialentrepreneur.com, and subscribe to the Exponential Entrepreneur Podcast to receive the next episode. Until next time, keep breaking through limiting beliefs and growing exponentially.